Hi, everyone. Welcome to Restitch America. My name is Alma Ohene-Opare, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today's guest is someone you are absolutely going to love. And I'm going to have her tell her story on how she came in contact with me here in a second. But I just want you to know we're starting up this new season, and we're excited for what is coming. We took a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back now because there's a lot of things going on in our country that I believe we need to discuss. And I want, one of my original goal for this podcast was to create a place where Americans can have civil conversations. That is the most important thing that I believe we're losing as Americans. And so I want to bring people from all walks of life, give them the opportunity to share how they are benefiting America and how they look at the world, and potentially how we can begin to see opportunities to unite. I think a lot of people forget that, one of the parts of our name as a country is the United States. And unfortunately, we are moving away from that unity. So our guest today is January Donovan, and we're going to hear from her, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her background, her story, and why she's doing what she's doing today, and why she believes in America, and so on and so forth. So relax and enjoy the show. All right, so January, that's an interesting name.
Good morning, Alma. Thank you so much for having me. I am so grateful. And like you said, I saw you speaking about immigration. And as an immigrant and as somebody who truly believes in the American dream, I thought there needs to be a dialogue on reverence for the immigration process. I think upholding the American dream, the sacrifices of the immigrants that had to fight to come to America. And I think that that's what you were promoting is how do we restitch America as immigrants, but in a way that brings reverence to our Constitution, to the flag, and what it means to be an American, what it means to be united, even amidst the different cultures. And so that's what I thought I'm going to talk to Al. I'm going to find figure out
Yeah,
because I think it's a beautiful conversation, and I do think it's time for us to restitch America.
definitely, definitely. And one of the ways I think about it is this. I feel like we have forgotten, one, our united identity.
Mhm,
And I think we've built all these different factions. And I don't believe it was at the beginning, this was intentional, right?
mhm,
There was this effort to help people still recognize their heritage, show reverence to where they came from, their culture, and the
mhm,
fact that America is a melting pot of a lot of different cultures and ideals and ideas. However, what makes America America is not the fact that we have all these different cultures, is the fact that all these cultures can still be expressed while holding on
mhm.
to something greater, which is Americanism. And for me, when I think about Americanism, it is the idea that all men are created equal and that everything we do in this world is to establish the sovereignty of the human life and to give that human life every opportunity to succeed. That's America, or at least that's what America was established to do, is to identify the potential of human beings and create a system that allows that potential to flourish. And that's really important. So before we dive any further, I just want to get to know you on a personal level,
Mhm,
get the audience to know what you do. So you talked about being an immigrant to
mhm.
America. So tell me a little bit about that. When did you come to America? How did you get introduced to America? And what was life like when you got here?
Sure. First, I am just a little bit of background. I run a school called the Woman's School, which trains women how to be a woman. And I know that sounds controversial, but I'm going to basically share today why women today have been deprived of who they are as women, and that it's time for us to actually focus on training women. My story really began, I think, as a little girl in the Philippines, from the slums of the Philippines. My first awareness was living in, with my friends had no underwear, no food, no problem. And so, and I loved it. I love the fact that the focus was joy. It was all
Mhm.
the little things in life. And so my parents, who, you know, are entrepreneurs in the Philippines, but poor, said, we need to go to America because that's where justice is served. I remember that, like as a little girl, that's the land of the just. And so at a very young age, 7 years old, my parents said, we're going to the United States, and we have to leave all three children, left us with my aunt and my uncle, and so that we could fight for the American dream and we could bring you to America. And so, Alma, I remember the day my father and my mom left as a 7-year old. My sister was 2, my brother was 5. But it was interesting to me. So I didn't see my parents for 5 years straight because that's what you have to do to fight for the American dream. I remember my parents would call once a week, and I remember the number $1,000 per an hour phone call because we didn't have FaceTime. And I remember they would call, they would be in tears because imagine not seeing your child grow up for all those years. But what's so fascinating to me was that never for 1 second was I resentful because it was very clear that they were coming to America to give us a better future. And so that was my story. I didn't see them for all these years. I remember, looking at all the other parents there in the Philippines and said, one day I'll see my parents. But I never thought, I was resentful. I thought because they're fighting for the American dream. It was a lot harder for my parents than it was for me. And so at 11 years old, my parents came back because when they came here, actually, the only job they could find, and by the way, they had a business in the Philippines that was comfortable. We had housekeepers and we had nannies. That's what you do in third world countries. It was a normal way of life, only to come to America to become housekeepers and nannies because that was the only way they could get the fastest way to get a legal visa. So this sacrifice for 5 years, you know, nannying and doing housekeeper work for a shot at the American dream. And so then we got our, visa. My parents brought us here to United States. And I remember, my mom came home and said, we're going to United States. I remember thinking, that's what every Filipino wants. They want a shot at the American dream. And here I was on my way to the American dream. And so I never took it for granted, not as an 11-year-old and not as a 46-year-old. And so that's why, to me, when I think of illegal immigration, when I think of people stomping on the flag, when I think of the lack of reverence of and gratitude of so many, I think, Americans that have been raised here, I think you have no idea what it means to be an immigrant and the sacrifice it takes for the American dream. And you've taken for granted this beautiful country because if you go anywhere in the world, they all want to come to America because
That's
here it is the land of the free.
Thank you so much. One thing that caught my eye as you were speaking was the idea of separation from your family.
Mhm.
Today, a lot of people use the idea of family separation as, this idea of inhumanity. But when I think about it, there are lots of immigrant stories like yours where people had to be separated voluntarily from their families in order to make the sacrifice necessary. And so a lot of people, and the funny thing is when you think about illegal immigration, a lot of these parents separate themselves from their own children and bring them across the border by themselves, unaccompanied, put them in the hands, in some cases, of cartels to bring them across the border. And so it always interests me when people say family separation. I know that, that can be traumatic for parents and children. However, a lot of times people make the sacrifice to separate themselves for the purpose of, achieving something greater and then opening that opportunity later on for their children. And so I know families in my own country who have done that. Now, let's talk about your life in America. So you came here, and what was life like? So what a lot of people who want to divide America will say is, well, you come here, a little brown girl, and you're going to immediately be met with white supremacy, and you're going to be immediately, the minority in the room who has to worry about, how you dress or how you speak, whether you can speak the language, and so on and so forth. And I see that anytime people push that narrative, it's not to truly understand, the challenges immigrants have to go through, but
Mhm.
always to create this image of America as this inhospitable place that is not good for Black or brown people, or people of other ethnicities. So what was your experience there as an 11-year-old coming to America?
Yes, and I think I'm going to share my experience, but I think that's Marxism coming in to divide us. I think there was a a direct shift. My impression as a 11-year-old girl coming to America was unbelievable hospitality. Like, I mean, the idea that I was Asian in this, I was in this all mostly Jewish neighborhood, mostly white, some Asians, some Black. I mean, it was never an issue. It was never an issue because I never saw it as an issue, perhaps, but also I came in and I wanted to be an American without ever also letting go of my heritage as a Filipino. So I was always so shocked, and I'm still so shocked. And the narrative that people are saying, oh, these are the Filipinos and these are Asian. I'm like, no, the idea is that when you come to a country, you assimilate to the culture and you study and observe. And so to me, it was seamless. It was, I was so, okay, I'm going to, even for my story. Okay, so in the Philippines, I grew up, just my own experience, that Americans were superior. Like it was sort of this, as a little girl, superior in a sense, they look good, they look better, they had a better country. We were a third world country. So I remember thinking, Alma, I will not be accepted. Like I just was sort of this idea that I was not going to be accepted. And and I remember my dad said, study everyone around you, learn to bring value, communicate with them. And by the time I was in eighth grade, I came in sixth grade. By the time I was in eighth grade, I was the president of our school. And it wasn't like, oh, here, look at January. It was never an Asian thing. It was like the goal was to bring value. And by the time I was in high school, I was vice president of our class. I graduated as president of our whole entire school. And that's what, 7, 8 years into America. And I think, well, I with the whole idea of race, I always think we could really shut this down in one scientific evidence. So in our part of our brain called reticular activating system, which means that if what we focus on expands. If I'm looking for a white, van, all of a sudden I start to see all the white van. If I'm looking for a red shirt, I start to see all the red shirts. I never saw them before because our brain helps us find what we're looking for. When we put race as a lens in which we see everything, that is exactly what we're going to find. We're going to find racism in everything because it's the lens. I see all the people who talk in The View, or, all these, I would say, the pundits, and all they talk about is race. And I'm like, because that is what you're looking for. And to me, I just feel like you have lost the gift of being an American if that's the only thing you focus on. And what you've done is created a narrative of division that was really never there. If you look at the 80s and the 90s, that was the height of everybody's welcome. Like it really was. If you look back, and I think, in my opinion, we I think we've had presidents who actually were the one who introduced the race bait narrative. I think we've made it such a focal point. I don't think America, in my opinion, is as racist. We've just created a narrative where everyone is divided because we've been infiltrated by the Marxist agenda, which is victim, victor, oppressor, oppressed. And I think we've got to stand up to it. It's like that is not America. It never was. And so and even this idea of you're a woman, I'm a man, men are more privileged. I'm like, the data never says that actually, men are more privileged. It's not. If you look at the data and the stats of how men are getting left behind, it's not accurate. It's a whole lot of talking, and there's not a lot of substance behind it.
Seriously, it is mind-boggling to me that with this amount of opportunity that people have, and the opportunity to be productive in life,
Yeah.
that they spend their years looking for ways to actually be regressive, right?
Yes.
Ways to actually destroy than to build up.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating to me that we have basically a complex. It's almost like a grievance industrial complex,
Mhm.
right? Where people are trying to either adopt new grievances or invent new ones. And it's just interesting to me that they don't see the opportunities that are available here for all Americans. Now, that does not mean that, America has no flaws. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that people do as a means to conflate the
Yes.
idea of American exceptionalism with the fact that we still have problems. But, understanding that we have problems is one thing, but going and attempting to denigrate the foundational, principles of our existence as a country is the thing that keeps tearing us apart. And unfortunately, there was a recent poll that showed that the Gen Alpha generation are in many cases growing up anti-American even
Mhm.
before they graduate high school, right? Because they've been told this narrative of American oppression across the world. And they have bought some of this narrative hook, line, and sinker, unfortunately. And that's part of the reason why I believe immigrants have a special opportunity to help restitch America, to help
Ah,
rekindle what it means to be American, because we have seen the other side, right? We have seen the other side. We've seen the loss of potential, the loss of opportunity.
yeah.
So much opportunity is buried in the third world,
Yeah.
not because people don't have ambition, not because people don't have dreams, but because people don't know how to take those dreams. The system is not set up to turn dreams into reality. And one of the things you said that caught my eye was the idea of justice, this being a just place. And that's why illegal immigration is such an offensive
Mhm.
idea to a lot of immigrants. And the reason is because we came here, many of us, because we wanted a system we could count on,
Yes.
a system where the laws were not tailor-made to oppress specific people because they have specific influence, right? And we wanted a place where we could be seen as equals with everybody else. And we wanted a place where we could, come up and thrive as equals and not be seen as a threat to the leaders because we are, making waves in the economy or something like that. And the way that that works is through the rule of law. As
Yeah.
soon as you begin to make excuses for lawbreakers, you begin to sow the seeds that ends up dismantling the organization or the country in this case.
Yeah.
So that is a really important thing. And thank you for sharing that story. Now let's do this. Let's go to your story about the crisis that you have seen in what you call womanhood, right? So your organization, your company is the Women's School. And I want to hear what precipitated the whole idea of starting the Women's School. Now we're going to jump into her story about what she sees as a crisis in America when it comes to womanhood and raising young girls and turning them into powerhouses of womanhood. And so go ahead and tell us a little bit about how this all came about and what you are doing at the Women's School.
Yeah. So for me, it started out because I really didn't know how to be a woman. And what does that mean? What does that really actually
Exactly. I'm sure people are asking, what do you
Yeah.
mean how to be a
I,
woman?
yeah. So, I think that let me just go back into sort of the history, and women and men are different. And in the history of America or the Western world, there was an injustice and inequality with the way women were treated. They did not have the same opportunities that men did. And so in the late 1800s, there was a push for equal rights, rightfully so, right? We needed to have equal but different voices in the Western world. So the push in its original state was pro-life, pro-mother, pro-family, pro-woman, pro-men. That was the first wave of feminism. During the second wave of feminism, Marxism entered into the second wave during the 60s. And so feminism, which was their push for further equality for women so that there was equal justice, equal pay, now became infused with a Marxist agenda of oppressor and oppress. And so what happened is that feminism, one of the biggest movements ever in history, became hijacked with Marxist agenda. And what feminism did was then it infiltrated every facet of society, our education system, our government, our justice system, to a point that right now, this infrastructure of our education system is 80% women, which is the infrastructure itself is by nature very feminine. And so what we have is this, I would say, this push for equality that actually said empowerment in women meant disempowering men. In order to be equal to men, we had to no longer need men. And so all this narrative then infiltrated in our culture. And so women from a very young age were told you can do anything that a man can do, right? Which is, we have the same opportunities, but we can't do everything that men can do, as well as men can probably do things. Not that we can't, but we are simply different. Biologically, men are stronger. You know, it is not that we are lesser of a sex, it's that we are made differently by God. And so this, I think, historical background really kind of, if you think about it, it's permeating everywhere. I am woman, hear me roar. I don't need a man. It went from equality to I can do anything that a man can do to we don't need a man. I mean, it's really has been so drastic. And I think we are at a point in our culture where we know there's a problem, where we know the idea that we no longer need a man isn't actually working. So that's the historical. So when I was, a young girl as an immigrant, I bought into the narrative of, you know, I am woman, hear me roar. I can do anything. I can be everything I want to, which was accurate at some degree. But then, Alma, I didn't I didn't know how to communicate myself as a woman. I didn't know my value. I didn't know how to make decisions as a woman. I didn't know how to manage my mind. I didn't know how to even have conversations where I honored my dignity as a woman. And so really the woman's school was born out of the fact that I'm like, I don't know how to show up as a woman. And in college, I met a mentor named Elena, my first year in college, and she said, January, what kind of woman do you want to be? And meanwhile, I was depressed, anxious, stressed, everything you can imagine that most women are going through today, low self-worth, self-hate. And so I looked at her and I said, Elena, you don't have a choice. You are what you are. And I said, yes, you do. Let's design you. And so for 3.5 years, I met with her every single month. And she said, let's redesign the January Donovan that is incongruent with what it means to be a woman. And so my journey then transformed the way I developed relationship. It transformed my friendship and then really became the seed of saying, whoa, I'm not alone. Nobody knows how to be a woman. And here's what I tell women all the time. Where is it in our school system and infrastructure does a woman know that her value is not determined in what people think of her? Where does a woman learn how to make a decision that doesn't violate her nature as a nurturer? We have wombs, and our decisions have to be in harmony with the fact that we are vulnerable. Where does a woman know how to make a decision? Where does a woman know how to honor a man? Where does a woman know how to compliment a man? All these are assumed we just because we are born a woman doesn't mean we know how to be a woman. And so really the organization was born out of my own lack of awareness. And I began in this journey of just giving women hundreds and hundreds of skills the school system wasn't giving them. Their mother could not give them, especially because they were taught lies, as that was, I think, infused by the feminist ideology. And in 2019, we said, why don't we take the school online? And we grew to 40 countries in just under 3 years with thousands of students. And I think because there was a hunger for depth, for real training, and not this idea of women's empowerment that was really void of skill training. And that's our mission is women today have been deprived of what it means to be a woman because of equality. Why? And if you think about our school system, we took God out of our school system, which, by the way, our America was based on Judeo-Christian principles. Now we're taking gender out of school system. We need to educate women in the heart of their home. So what we do is we have an online training system that teaches women how to be a woman. We teach hundreds and hundreds of skills that we're not getting in our education system, we're not getting in our home, and we're giving women access to training that they've always needed and deserved in order to actually live a flourishing life. And I think we're on a mission to not just restore femininity, but masculinity, because the truth is that we can never have a movement that helps women but disempowers men. It's never going to work. It has to be both.
Wow, this is amazing. And thank you so much for sharing this. I agree wholeheartedly. Um, this idea that, you will just somehow assimilate or actually absorb through osmosis, what your role is supposed to be, and how you're supposed to act in certain situations. I think the same goes for men as
Yes,
well, that
it
men
is.
need training. And I know that there are other people who are attempting to do these kinds of boot camps and things for men as well. We need to understand what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father, and so on and so forth. And I love what you're doing on the women's side, is letting people know that there are skills that can be taught,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
There are principles that can be received and implemented in a person's life in order to, give them the best chance to
mhm.
use their femininity to accomplish great things in this world. I have two daughters, and today, actually, one of my daughters is leaving to go to college. So this is my first daughter who is leaving for college. I'll be dropping her off later today.
Oh,
And I think about what you are talking about right now.
yeah.
I hope that we have trained her and we've given her the best opportunity to be successful as a woman. However, I would love to expose her to some of these skill
Yes.
training programs
Mhm.
so that she understands her worth, that she
Yes.
understands her power. Because one of the greatest things our daughters are struggling with is this kind of comparative analysis that they're doing constantly,
Yeah.
looking into the world and seeing something that they feel they cannot achieve
Yes.
themselves. And that is causing a whole bunch of anxiety,
Yep.
causing them to doubt themselves, causing them to feel depressed in various situations, and so on. But it is important for them to connect with a program like yours for the purpose of understanding where they stand today in the world today, not back in 1950, right?
Mm.
Not
Yeah.
back in
No.
1870, is what exists today, the reality that exists today, and to leverage the reality, the opportunity that they have today to actually reach their full potential. And
Yes.
I love what you're doing. And one of the things that I have decided to do, because I love what you're doing, is when we met and we started talking about this, I thought it was a match made in heaven. I was at the time working on a project to create a coaching platform for people. And so when we talked, we didn't actually know that this was a thing. I was building my own thing, and you had reached out to me. And on that first conversation, you learned that I was building this kind of coaching platform. And you told me you have, people who have adopted your platform, the Women's
Mhm.
School, who are delivering these trainings. And
Mm-hmm.
so we saw an opportunity to work together.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing. So I am announcing today that the Women's School is going to be one of our premier sponsors of Restitch America. And the reason is because I believe in what they're doing. I believe that we need education and we need the opportunity to redirect the narrative that has been created around femininity, around womanhood.
Yes.
The fact that the world today, the feminist movement today, is allowing men to redefine what it means to be a woman, right? Which is, I think, an offensive idea.
Yeah.
And to empower our young girls not to look into the world and try to compare themselves to, the caricatures that have been created
Mhm.
in the media about what a woman should be, but to truly connect with their womanhood and their femininity and recognize that they have, I would say, superpowers
They
that
do.
are in infancy that need to be nurtured. And so I love this partnership of the Women's School with the Restitch America, because I believe one of the ways we restitch America is to restore truth about certain fundamental principles.
Mhm.
And womanhood is a fundamental principle or a fundamental area that we need to focus on as a country, because who would have thought that, 20 years ago when I came to America, that today we would be fighting for the definition of what it means to be a woman,
It's
that we
just
would have a
crazy.
Supreme Court judge
Yeah.
candidate tell the world that she cannot define what it means to be a woman because she's not a biologist.
It's an injustice to women. I mean, Alma, I have to say this. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, with your daughter, because I think, you probably have a lot of followers that have daughters. I just want to give you hope, okay? Because the problem with comparison and competition that's driving women into antidepressant. I mean, that's the truth because they don't feel like they're worth anything. Really comes from training. And here's what I mean by that. From a very young age, we have trained our children to say, you're a B student, you're an A student. We go to sports and we teach our children to look at we by default, what is everyone else doing? What is everybody's hair? What does everybody look like? See, the problem is that we can't learn by default, right? Like just like I meet so many women today. We have a health crisis. We talk about organic food. We talk about learning how to make sure that we're, eating clean. Nobody's teaching women how to cook, how to clean, and how to love your man with a good meal. Like that is true feminine excellence. And by the way, that doesn't mean I'm not capable of building a business or being a nurse or a doctor. It just means I know my strength. The strength of a woman lies in her capacity to receive and nurture love. Women in a health crisis need to learn how to make a really good meal and order her home. But the problem is the same thing, is that this comparison competition is happening because we have to train our children how to look at another woman, because the media is saying compete, compete, compete. We have to teach our daughters to say your worth is never for sale. That we walk in every room. My role as a woman, Alma, is to look, observe the room, study the room, and say, my role is to bring value in this room. Not to compete and to compare, not to say, hey, look at me, look what look me, the selfie, a self-absorbed woman who feels so worthless. Why? Because there's always going to be somebody better than you. That's why comparison is such a disease. It's like smoking. You get addicted to it. It's literally a neurological bad habit. So I tell women, you can cure it, just like a stroke victim can learn how to walk again. You can replace comparison competition if women understood that being a woman is an art, that feminine excellence is not is exactly how we're going to heal America. Because we have this two camp, women's empowerment movement and fragile femininity. Think about your grandmothers. Think about the women in the Philippines, the old grandma. They were not fragile. I bet they were strong. They weren't crying because the dishes weren't made, because the dog I was like, no. You are stronger than that woman. You're not here to compete and to compare. Your interior strength is how you can influence culture. And if we go back to Genesis, what did Eve do? She influenced the man. That is actually the strength of a woman. It's so manipulated. And you know what? Because it's a $1 billion industry to have this, physically beautiful woman literally change the way women is supposed to be because of the power of a woman's influence. But can you imagine feminine excellence that is rooted in truth, beauty, and goodness, and how she is able to influence men and raise the standard of manhood because of who she is? That is the kind of woman that's going to restitch America. She's fierce, but she's tender. She's kind, but she's not a pushover. She's persistent, but she's also patient. She's respectful, but she knows exactly where her boundaries are. She knows she lives with a level of standard that allows her to walk in any room and not feel insecure. She knows her femininity, but she raises masculinity. That is how we restitch America, to understand that our sexuality is part of healing America and can never be apart from it. We can never have a divided your man camp, woman camp. That is what the feminist movement did. That's what the toxic, sort of masculinity did. But that's a fringe movement. Most men and most women are good, but they need the skills on how to actually show up to honor their dignity.
I couldn't have said it better. This is inspiring, and I'm sure you all understand why we're partnering to make sure that this kind of education can get out to the masses so that we can begin to change America from its roots, right? Starting with our children who are coming up. And this is also not just for children or young women. This is
No.
also for women, at any age who
And
wants
any
to
age, all the way
reclaim.
to 80. That's our we have thousands of students, 13 all the way to 80.
Yep,
And because every woman needs training.
exactly.
So
Exactly. So thank you so much,
you're most
January, for
welcome.
meeting with us today. This has been a fascinating conversation. I have enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm sure our
Me too.
audience is going to enjoy it as well. Thank you so much. This was amazing. And,
Thank
and
you,
so
Alma.
going forward, you will hear me talk about the Women's School as part of our podcast as a sponsor so that we can direct people to the kind of education that I believe will turn America back towards greatness. And so once
Mm.
again, thank you all for joining us today on Restitch America. We will see you next week.